Trump kicking off his infrastructure plan by privatizing air traffic controllers. What comes next? Captain John Weeks was in the room with the president. He represents pilots of Southwest Airlines. He is here, and he will tell us why this move is long overdue. Countdown, coming right back. While the White House focuses on health care and taxes at this hour, our nation's crumbling infrastructure was at the top of the president's agenda yesterday. The president dubbing this week Infrastructure Week by championing proposals in desperate need of reform. But first on the docket, the privatization of our nation's air traffic control system, which has some scratching their heads. But certainly not our next guest, the president of Southwest Airlines Pilots Association, representing over 8,700 aviators. He was present during Trump's meeting on how to improve air traffic control. Captain John Weeks, good to see you. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, Lauren. How are you?
So, a lot of people are saying, I hit that pothole. I have to go get my car fixed. Why didn't you start with the bridges and tunnels and the build out and the fix there? Why did he start with the privatization of the air traffic control system?
Well, this has been going on for decades, and what we need is a sustainable flow into the system so we can implement the technologies that my airline has and several others have to go to the next gen phase of this, if you will. And it will allow us to be more efficient. It'll lower the carbon footprint. It'll allow for higher traffic flows at some of the slot congested airports. It'll reduce block times for the traveling public. And we need it to be sustainable so we can do the build out and implement the technologies that we already have.
Will this save flyers money?
Yes, I think in the long run it will, because you're going to reduce the amount of time they spend in the air. You're going to reduce the block times on the aircraft themselves, which will reduce in lower costs for the airlines and more efficiencies and time benefits for the passengers traveling. A
major obstacle, as I see it, to infrastructure spending and this build out is getting investors on board as you try to privatize. What are some incentives that can be thrown in to help with the privatization? Do you want to loosen regulations? Would we eventually see, raising tolls more than they are now?
Well, one of the things the president said yesterday was the regulatory body would remain in effect, but the operating body would function as a nonprofit. And they would operate and function budgetarily on their own, but still be regulated by the FAA. Now, the process for the generation of the revenue in that would be spread out over several different entities, but one of the things we want to protect is safety, because we fly the planes, and the other is, I'm a card-carrying member of the AOPA, and we want to make sure general aviation does not take a hit as well, and that has been echoed throughout the halls of Congress, both on the House and the Senate side as well. So there are ways to do it, and even if you look at NAV Canada, they've actually lowered their fees over the existence of their system.
What do you expect to hear next as we start to get details of this $1 trillion infrastructure spending plan? What's next on the agenda?
Right. What we expect is the devil's going to be in the details. We were in support of the privatization last year as it was attached to the bill. We've got to see the details of this year's bill to see exactly where we come out on. But whatever shape, whatever form it takes, it's got to be the modernization of the ATC system, the air traffic control system. That's where we start. That's where we should have bipartisan support, and that will allow us to implement those technologies, and then we continue the build out with the infrastructure, with the airport, with the terminals, I would hope, to give ourselves the greatest aviation system that the countries in the world has ever known.
Some airlines, John, are banning some devices, including laptops, on some flights. What are the chances of a ban like that happening on domestic flights?
Lauren, I would say they're not very great, because one thing we don't think about a lot of times is the unintended consequences. With regard to the lithium-ion batteries, one could start a fire in the hold, but if you have to put a lot more of them down there, they could ignite others. We have halon extinguishing systems in the cargo hold, but they put out the oxygen. The lithium-ion batteries generate their own oxygen. So before we go and go into the unintended consequences, What I would suggest we do, especially on the domestic flights where we're not, the laptops are not coming from a suspect area, is to make sure that we do the explosive screening better at the checkpoint themselves. The travelers are going to like that better. Our passengers are going to like that better because they're going to be able to take their devices with them on the airplane and on their person.
And I'm sure the administration would be spending money on that screening for the laptops themselves, right?
Yes, and
Yes.
they already do screen on some of the random screening, as I'm sure you've been through the airports.
Oh,
You know,
yes.
they will random screen for, yeah, I'm sure, yeah, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Captain John Weeks, thank you so much for your time today.
Lauren, thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Good to talk to you. Well, on Wall Street, the close